Thanks for joining us. And today we're going to talk about, does Shambhavi Mahamudra work? So a number of folks have asked me to provide my opinion about Shambhavi Mahamudra. And in case you don't know, Shambhavi Mahamudra is a practice that is taught by Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev, who is a fairly famous Indian yogic teacher. He teaches meditation, spiritual practices, and so on. And so he has a lot of followers in India and worldwide. And so I have had a number of people approach me and say, hey, what do you think of Shambhavi Mahamudra? Now, I teach Kriya Yoga in the householder lineage of Panchanan Bhattacharya, who was Lahiri Baba's preeminent disciple. And so this is considered by many to be the original version of Kriya. And so that is my orientation in which I assess others' practices. So my understanding of Shambhavi Mahamudra as taught by the Isha Yoga and Sadhguru is that it is multi-layered practice. They actually call something called Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya, which includes Shambhavi Mudra, or their version of it, and other practices that really come from Hatha Yoga. And so my understanding is that the practice begins with the Nadi Shodhana, which is the alternate nostril breathing, which is, a very common Hatha Yoga practice and is used by many worldwide. My understanding is that after doing a number of minutes of Nadi Shodhana, then one moves into doing their version of Shambhavi Mudra. And so my understanding is that the eyes are upraised and focused at the point between the eyebrows. And at the same time, one does a number of repetitions of Om, the Om mantra, the Bija seed mantra of Om. And so by focusing there, turning the eyes upwards, and really making the focus at the point between the eyebrows, chanting Om. And so the idea is that one is connecting with the Ajna chakra, this chakra in the third eye area, and chanting Om. And so this practice of the Shambhavi Mudra in this Shambhavi Mahamudra practice is a little different than what we do in the Panchanan Bhattacharya lineage of Kriya Yoga. And there have been some people in Kriya Yoga who have taught Shambhavi Mudra to making the focus the point between the eyebrows. From my perspective, this is not as effective as the version that we teach. And the reason is because when you're putting your attention at the point between the eyebrows, you're really engaging your awareness at a single point. And when we focus on points with our eyes, it's called foveal vision. So we are used to seeing a point, we'll turn and focus at another point, at another point. And what that does is it engages the left side of our brain. And the left side of our brain is more symbol-based, organization-based. And when we are going into meditation, we want to leave that side of our brain behind. We don't want to be focusing. What we want to do is to expand our awareness. So when I teach Shambhavi Mudra, what I do is raising the eyes gently, but engaging the peripheral vision. So you're not focusing at a point, you're not trying to find a chakra with your left brain. What you're trying to do is to expand your awareness by engaging your peripheral vision. So you can gently raise your eyes with your eyes closed and be very relaxed, engage your peripheral vision. And what that does is it engages the right side of your brain, which has spatial awareness, in particular the right hippocampus. And when you do that, it is very conducive to having deeper meditative experiences because you're not trying to focus, you will let go. And when you focus your awareness in meditation on a particular point, especially on the body, it really interferes with your transition into meditation. So I would say that the Shambhavi Mudra, as taught in the Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya, is not as effective as the version that we do in Kriya Yoga. Now, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's a more effective version is to engage that peripheral vision. You can raise your eyes slightly, relax your eyeballs, and just be aware of everything around you. And that will lead to a deeper state of consciousness. So in Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya, they continue that practice, chanting Om, as the attention is at the point between the eyebrows. And from there, they shift to a version of Bhastrika pranayama. Now, Bhastrika pranayama is also called fire breath. It is this very forceful inhalation and exhalation. It looks kind of like this. It's been popularized by Wim Hof, right? The Wim Hof breathing is basically a version of Bhastrika pranayama. And following the Bhastrika pranayama, they do some breath holds, the Kumbhaka. And holding the breath for a number of, I don't know how many seconds, probably as long as comfortable. And then that goes on for a few minutes, and then into a Dhyana version of meditation, basically just being still and then being in meditation. So that is kind of the trajectory of the Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya. And from my perspective, when we stick Bhastrika near the end of a meditation, what you're doing with Bhastrika pranayama is that you're really engaging your sympathetic nervous system, right? And the kidneys and adrenals. And it's fine to do it for a short period of time, but doing it near the end of your meditation makes no sense in my mind at all. You're engaging your sympathetic nervous system. And when you're going into meditation, especially if you follow that, going into Dhyana, sort of a deeper meditation state, it really doesn't transition all that well. What you want to do is to be slowing down your breath prior to going into a still state. So at Modern Kriya, we teach a practice called heart rate variability resonance breathing. It is distilled from Kriya Yoga. And what it does is it really engages the parasympathetic nervous system by slowing down your breath, a slow intentional breathing that basically brings your breath below 7 breaths per minute threshold. And what that does is it starts to bring you into an internalized state. One of the ways that it does this in particular is by making a slower exhalation which stimulates or activates the dorsal vagal complex, which is part of your parasympathetic nervous system, a nerve that runs along the anterior part of your spine, that when stimulated, stimulates your medulla oblongata in the brainstem, which controls your heart rate. And that in turn slows down your heart rate. So you slow down your breath rate, you slow down your heart rate, and you start to get signs of the phrase response, signs of Pratyahara, galvanic skin response. So you start to feel some tingling in your body. It might be sort of a pulsation or warm, tingly hands. It could be just tingling in your face or whatever part of your body is very relaxed. And that is a sign that your parasympathetic nervous system is becoming predominant. And in Kriya Yoga, we do this Kriya pranayama, or heart rate variability resonance breathing, that gets us into a internalized state, Pratyahara. And then we may do some breath holds later in the practice, and then we relax. And what happens by doing a transition to meditation in that way is that your breath starts to shallow out, right, naturally. You're no longer doing intentional breathing. It starts to shallow out and it basically disappears. It's what people call breathlessness, but in Kriya Yoga, we call the tranquil breath. You're still breathing, but it is very, very shallow, very slight. And what happens as a consequence of setting the stage for that and transitioning into the tranquil breath is that you become deeply internalized, where your body basically disappears from your awareness. And you're in this internalized void, what we call Dharana. Now, Dharana is a phase, if you will, in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. So he talks about Niyama, which is the moral do's and don'ts, then Asana, being in a suitable posture for meditation, then pranayama, which is life force control or intentional breathing, which yields pratyahara, right, this internalization. And when you have a deep pratyahara, you get into dharana, right? You disappear into this internalized void. And from there, as you get deeply drawn into that meditative state and you become aware and become absorbed in your inner experiences, you transition into Dhyana, right? So doing a bunch of Hatha yoga practices with Bhastrika near the end, and then doing breath holds, and then going into sort of watching your meditative state won't likely transition you very effectively into a deep internalized state, the true Dhyana. So my assessment of that particular type of practice, the way those things are strung together, it's maybe not as effective. I would suggest doing Bhastrika near the beginning of the practice, right, which is a totally fine practice. It can make people feel recharged and energized, right? It's stimulating your sympathetic nervous system, but if you do it near the beginning of your practice, it's more likely to be effective. And then start to do something where you transition down. So you've got some activity with Bhastrika and so on at the beginning, And then maybe you will start to do some slower intentional breathing, stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system, starting to bring you inside into Pratyahara, right? And then you can do a little breath holds later, and then relax, transition into the tranquil breath, and boom, you're good. You will transition into Dharana and into Dhyana. And so that is my perspective on the way that those practices in Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya are taught. So I know that some people have said that this practice of Shambhavi Mahamudra Kriya is a miracle and that is incredible, and they started the program and they're doing it for 21 minutes a day and found that it really just made a huge impact on their life. Now, I'm not taking that away. I definitely say that's great. But I also say that probably any yoga meditation that you would do for 21 minutes a day will make a huge difference in your life over not doing it at all, right? So certainly, those practices will make you feel good. But if you really want to get into deep meditation, I would suggest that you do 21 minutes of heart rate variability resonance breathing, or learn Kriya Yoga and do the Kriya Yoga version of that. Because what you will find is that you will go into an extremely deep meditation, right? And you may have profound experiences, and you don't need to be doing techniques for 21 minutes to do that. So, that's just my take on it. I totally respect what other paths are doing with their approach to, yoga meditation and so on, and I wish everyone in that organization well, but that is my opinion. So if you have any questions about this video, feel free to send me an email at info@modernkriya.com. Also check our website at modernkriya.com and our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.